Varel 9 wasn't the kind of place anyone dreamed of being assigned to. A barren hunk of frozen rock, it hung lopsided in the orbit of a dead blue star, its surface scratched by needle-sharp winds and cosmic radiation. Officially, it was a joint research station, an experiment in interspecies cooperation and scientific exchange. Unofficially, it was where bureaucrats sent people they didn't want to deal with anymore. The human named Ronan had arrived 2 months ago with a duffel bag, a sarcastic grin, and a talent for finding every piece of machinery that hummed the wrong way. He fixed things that weren't broken just to have something to do. Half the crew found him charming, the other half were waiting for someone to float him out an airlock. But what caught Ronan's attention most wasn't the view of the cracked horizon or the synthetically miserable food rations. It was her, Lysera. She wasn't stationed with the others. She lived in the northern wing, near the energy labs, alone as if the base itself had made a decision to push her into a corner. Most avoided her. Some were afraid. A few claimed they didn't even know she was still here. Ronan had asked about her once and got only shrugs and a quickly changed subject. So naturally, he sought her out immediately. Their first conversation had been awkward, mostly because she didn't speak, just stared at him with those dark, unblinking eyes while he rambled about an air filtration unit leaking like it had allergies. Her ears, long, elegantly arched, twitching slightly every time he made a joke. "You know," he said, leaning against the wall of her lab, "you don't have to look at me like I'm some kind of fungal growth." She didn't answer. "I mean, you can if you want. I've been called worse. Once got nicknamed mildew during basic training. Still nothing." He pointed at her diagnostic table. "Is that a molecular stabilizer? Nice. I tried to fix one once. Ended up creating an unstable bubble that aged a muffin 60 years in 3 seconds. That made her blink. Progress." Now, weeks later, their conversations weren't quite conversations, but they existed. He spoke. She replied, usually in clipped words, mostly to correct him. And then one day when he made a particularly bad pun about ion storms being moody teens, she smirked. Barely. But it was there. That was the day he started eating his lunch outside her lab every shift. The others thought he was crazy. "Why are you bothering with her?" asked Dr. Bintari, a reptilian xenopsychologist with a temper shorter than her claws. "She reminds me of my ex," Ronan said, "except this one hasn't tried to set my clothes on fire yet. That I know of." He liked being around Lysera, not just because she was interesting, though she was, in that mysterious, possibly could-kill-you-with-a-glance sort of way, but because she didn't pretend. Everyone else on the base performed politeness like a protocol. Lysera didn't bother. When she liked something, she said nothing. When she disliked something, she still said nothing. But her ears folded back slightly like a warning sign. And then there was her energy, literally. She hummed. At first he thought it was the lab's equipment, but it wasn't. Sometimes when she was focused, the air around her felt charged, like just before a lightning strike. Tools would flicker. Lights would dim. Once his communicator burst into static just standing near her. She never explained it. He didn't ask. But he noticed that on the days he made her laugh, even just once, the hum softened. He started bringing her snacks. Human snacks. She stared at each with the intense suspicion of someone who had once bitten into something that bit back. He finally found one she liked. Caramelized starch puffs. He pretended he didn't notice when she hoarded them. Today the storm outside was hitting its peak. Static discharge rippled across the dome windows, painting spiderwebs of light across the hallway. Ronan was carrying a thermos and 2 mugs when he entered the lab. "You drink tea?" he asked. "No." "Great. More for me. I brought you a cup anyway. It's peppermint. I read somewhere it calms nerves, or makes you burp. One of the two." She didn't look up from her console. He set the mugs down and leaned casually on the counter. "So, important scientific question. You got a name for the energy thing you do? Or should I just keep calling it the zap in my head?" Lysera slowly turned toward him. "You have no clearance to know anything about me." He raised an eyebrow. "Didn't say I wanted clearance. Just a nickname. The zap makes you sound cool." Her ears twitched again. That tiny smirk. It was addictive. "You're not afraid of me," she said. "Should I be?" Her gaze deepened. Others are. Even my own kind. He shrugged. Well, I'm not most people. I fixed a processor once using bubble gum and an old sock. Fear isn't really my default setting. Why? He blinked. Why what? Why aren't you afraid of me? He didn't answer at first. The hum in the room seemed to draw closer, wrapping around them. Finally, he looked at her, not joking, not deflecting, and said, because I've been the person everyone walked away from too. I know what that looks like. I just never expected to see it in someone like you. Silence. The energy pulsed softly. The lights didn't flicker. She stared at him. Unreadable. Then her eyes narrowed. You are either foolish, she said, or incredibly lonely. He lifted his cup in a mock toast. Why not both? For the first time, her laugh wasn't small. It rang, short and sharp, like a sound she hadn't made in years. Ronan felt it like a victory, not for himself, for her. I've got more snacks in my locker, he said. If you're ever in the mood to gamble with your digestive system. She rolled her eyes. You talk too much. And yet, you haven't vaporized me. That's got to count for something. She shook her head, but the hum in the air stayed warm, steady. He didn't leave. She didn't ask him to. Outside, the storm raged. Inside the lab, for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel so heavy. Lysra stood by the viewport, arms crossed behind her back, watching the aurora storms twist across the skies of Varel 9. She was calm, visibly, but Ronan could feel it. The faint hum again. Not dangerous this time, just electric. Like she was a live wire waiting for someone to either understand her or regret trying. He slid into the lab with a thermal blanket slung over one shoulder and a tray balanced in his hands. I come bearing gifts of warmth and overly salted potato discs. Also, I may or may not have stolen this blanket from the infirmary, so if anyone asks, we both tripped and fell on it simultaneously in a display of interspecies diplomacy. She turned slightly, one pointed ear twitching. What are salted potato discs? Human joy in circular form. I have no need for nutrition at this moment. Perfect. More for me. He dropped the blanket onto a bench and plopped down cross-legged on the floor, crunching into the snack with loud theatrical enjoyment. Ah, the taste of home and impending heart disease. Lysra gave him a long look. You are very noisy. And you are alarmingly quiet. Between us, we make an average person. That's teamwork. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she walked back to her console, fingers dancing over the controls with inhuman speed. Data shimmered across the screens in vertical waves of light, displaying particle behavior, energy fluctuations, and what Ronan could only assume were some equations capable of bending space-time if you sneezed at the wrong moment. I've been reviewing stellar degradation patterns in Sector Iota 12, she said without turning. There's a pulsar cluster behaving erratically. Emissions suggest artificial interference. Artificial as in sabotage? Artificial as in intelligent activity. Possibly a signal. A pattern. Ronan tilted his head. You saying someone out there is blinking stars at us like Morse code? Perhaps. If so, their grasp of physics is imaginative. Well, so is mine. I once tried to fix a food replicator with duct tape and peanut butter. It worked. For 5 seconds. Then we had flaming yogurt. A pause. I've read your file, she said, turning now. You were demoted for inappropriate use of military-grade components in personal cooking experiments. Technically, I created the first high-velocity pancake launcher. You're insane. I prefer creatively unstable. She gave him one of her subtle expressions. A ghost of amusement barely visible unless you were looking for it. He always was. I'm serious about the signal, she said, tone dipping. We may be standing on the edge of something vast, and we're the only ones listening. Well, lucky the universe got us instead of someone boring. She studied him a moment longer, then gestured toward the console. Do you wish to assist? Only if I get to press one button dramatically and then say something like, we're not alone. You may press 2 buttons. He grinned and rolled up beside her, scanning the streams of alien data. It looked like gibberish, but there was a rhythm to it, a tempo, almost musical. He pointed. Right there. That looks like repetition. Could be code. Could be a really bored space whale tapping on the walls of reality. Lizra nodded, zooming in. The signal pattern looped once, then again, before fracturing into silence. I've seen something like this before, she said. Not here, not recently. Long ago, when I was still training on my homeworld. He glanced at her. You don't talk much about your home. Nobody here really knows anything about you. Good. Right. Mysterious. Gotta keep that Space Queen reputation sharp. Her eyes narrowed. Why do you always make jokes? Because if I don't, I'll remember that I'm 30 million kilometers from anything resembling home, with a broken heater, a space toilet that screams when it flushes, and a crush on someone who could probably fry my nervous system with a frown. Silence. The hum in the room pulsed once, just once, softly. You flatter yourself, she said, but there was no venom in it. Ronan leaned back, hands behind his head. That's fair, but don't pretend you don't like the snacks. I saw you take the entire bag of marshmallow moons yesterday. They are inefficient as food sources, but delicious. She gave the slightest nod. A concession. He'd take it. Later that night, after he'd left the lab, Lysera stood alone again at the viewport. The data looped silently beside her, echoing in its untranslatable rhythm. She placed one hand on the glass, feeling the vibration of the windstorms beyond the dome. She had once silenced entire rooms by walking in, had once stood before tribunals, councils, and even enemies with the full weight of her lineage behind her. But none of them had ever sat on her lab floor and shared salted discs and talked about flaming yogurt like it was the most important story in the galaxy. None of them had ever asked her why she was alone. He did. And that question lingered in her mind like the signal, repeating, echoing, growing louder with each passing loop. The transmission stopped, just like that. After 12 cycles of repeating pulses, shifting harmonic tones, and waveforms that even Lysera couldn't fully decipher, it ended mid-loop, leaving behind only silence and static. The lab lights flickered once, not from power loss, but as if the station itself sighed in disappointment. Ronan stared at the blank screen. Well, that's anticlimactic. It could mean several things, Lysera murmured, fingers dancing over the interface. They may have completed their message, or realized they were being observed. Or, she hesitated. They were destroyed. That took a dark turn fast. He squinted at her. You always jump to extinction-level theories, or is today special? My people are trained to anticipate loss. Mine are trained to make toast and avoid emotional intimacy, so we're even. She didn't smile, but the pause between her sentences had changed. Not mechanical anymore. Now it carried the weight of thought, of choice. We can't trace it further, she said. Whatever sent that message, it's gone now. Ronan slumped into the nearest chair, spinning once before his boot caught a corner and sent him lurching sideways. I vote we claim it was space dolphins trying to teach us interpretive math. No one can disprove that. She turned from the console. You're not what I expected from a military science liaison. That's because I'm not very good at it, he said, brushing imaginary dust off his shoulder. They needed someone expendable, charming, and utterly disposable. I aced all three. You are far from disposable, he blinked, then blinked again. That's either the nicest thing anyone said to me this year, or a sign you've finally decided I'm worth dissecting alive. Her eyes dropped for a second. Not shame, just thoughtfulness. Then gently, you've changed the energy of this place. I never meant for that to happen. He grinned. I'll take that as an apology for stealing my marshmallow moons. I regret nothing. Their gazes held, and something shifted again, but this time not with silence. A different hum, low and warm, buzzed between them, just under the edge of sound. So what happens now? Ronan asked. I don't know. She walked past him toward the central core, where the pulse sensors had been tied into the outer antenna array. He followed because that's what he did now. He followed her, not because of orders or duty or survival, but because she looked at him like he wasn't broken, and he looked at her like she was already more human than most people he'd known. We could submit a report, he said, blame space weather, claim temporary insanity, maybe sneak in a line about psychic whales. No, she said, we keep listening. He raised an eyebrow. Even if nothing ever answers? Especially then. Silence lingered again, but now it felt like a shared blanket rather than a barrier. The station buzzed softly, and above them, the stars crawled past the observation dome, distant and unknowable. Lesra lifted her hand, placing it against the dome glass. This time she didn't look away when she spoke. When I asked you why you didn't avoid me like the others, she started. He straightened. Yeah? I expected you to say something foolish. Oh, I absolutely had something foolish prepared. Something about your majestic bone structure and the possibility of being vaporized if I sneezed wrong. But you didn't, he shifted. Yeah. Well, you seemed like someone who needed to hear the truth. And now? Now? He scratched the back of his neck. Now I'm thinking maybe you weren't the only one who needed that. She stepped closer. Not all the way, but enough that he could see the faint shimmer in her irises again. Not power this time. Emotion. Deep, old, careful. You've become important to me, she said. He swallowed. Same here. I mean, maybe not quite the same. You're obviously the alien royalty type, and I'm more guy who gets electrocuted by door panels. But yeah, important. Her hand twitched slightly. Then she reached up and pressed 2 fingers gently to his chest. I'm not who I was when I came here. He covered her hand with his. None of us are. Outside, the aurora began again, dancing violet and silver across the upper atmosphere. Somewhere in the distance, a satellite pinged to life and drifted aimlessly. Later that night, Ronan sat at the same viewport where Lysra had once stood alone, eating the last of the salted potato discs while writing a transmission log with the subject line, "Not entirely a waste of funding." He paused, then under that added, "Found something. Not just a signal, something else. Someone." He thought for a moment, then typed the last line. "She doesn't walk alone anymore." Behind him, Lysera entered the room quietly, barefoot, her long ears flicking slightly at the buzz of the internal systems. He turned. She pointed at the bag in his hand. "Those better not be the last discs. You're terrifying. And you're loud." He tossed her the bag. They sat together side by side, watching the auroras and listening for ghosts in the stars. She didn't remember the sound of her name. That was the first truth. Not the real one, the one with meaning and syllables that once carried the weight of lineage and honor. No, all that had faded into the static hum of the work lines. Her designation now was Unit 7K, burned into her collar and reinforced with every buzz of the neural lock clipped behind her ear. When the horn blared across the upper levels of Mining Deck 9, her muscles moved without thought. Step, lift, deposit, repeat. The machinery screamed like dying beasts. The walls were sweat-slicked and forever quivering from distant drilling. Slag fumes clung to the recycled air like molasses, and the filtration units hadn't worked properly since the last solar flare. None of it mattered. The pain had long ceased to be pain. It was rhythm, routine, and silence was survival. But today the air smelled different. Not that it was better, just different, like someone had sprayed low-grade cologne through the vents and hoped no one would notice. She didn't look up, not at first. Curiosity was discouraged, often punished, usually via the business end of a shock baton. But the scent was too strange, like mint and regret. The newcomer's boots squeaked when he walked. That alone made heads turn. No one squeaked down here. You squelched, clanked, or stomped. Squeaking was for tourists. She finally glanced sideways. He was human, pale, wiry, with hair that stuck up like it had recently lost a war with a pillow. "Right," he announced, hands on hips, looking entirely unimpressed with the sea of chained laborers before him. "This looks like a fun and totally ethical work environment." Silence. A drone zipped by and zapped someone for coughing. The human grinned. "Nice. Encourages quiet reflection. I like it." He was escorted by 2 guards with the posture of bored hyenas. One of them gestured toward her. "That one's off limits. Don't engage. Doesn't speak. Hasn't in over a year." "Oh, great," he said. "A challenge. Love it." He wandered closer until he stood beside her conveyor unit, arms crossed, watching her like she might suddenly do a magic trick. "So what's your deal, Pointy?" She kept moving. Step, lift, deposit. Not talkative? That's fine. I've had relationships like that. Lasted 3 months. We communicated via eye rolls and passive-aggressive sighs. No response. Name's Dax, by the way. Dax Corin, new assignment. Long story involving a misunderstanding with a commanding officer, a karaoke machine, and an escaped ferret. Honestly, I was framed. She blinked. That alone earned him a triumphant smirk. I saw that. A blink. We're making progress. He returned the next day, and the next. Always during second rotation, always with a story, a joke, or a contraband muffin he'd smuggled from the officer's mess. He'd leave it near her station, mutter something about it not being poisoned, and walk off. She never touched them, but she began to watch him, subtly without turning her head. He talked to others, too, most of them wary, confused. A few laughed. One got punished for smiling too long. Dax took that one personally. Stole a shock baton from a guard's belt while distracting him with a juggling act using 3 vacuum-sealed nutrient bars. The baton was never recovered. On the 12th day, he sat cross-legged in the corridor while she hauled metal shards, droning on about how the base's coffee tasted like burnt tar mixed with guilt, and how he missed rain. She didn't know what rain felt like. She remembered light, but not weather. Then he stopped talking. A pause, longer than any he'd given before. And in that space, he said it. One word. Sorry. No joke, no smirk, just quiet. Her grip faltered, just for a breath. He saw it, didn't comment, just stood, nodded once, and walked away. Later that cycle, in the darkness of her recharged cell, she touched her throat. No sound came out, but a sound had entered, not from the outside, from within, a resonance, a memory of language. The syllables of her name stirred like dust in sunlight. The guards noticed nothing. Their minds weren't wired for subtlety, but the surveillance AI did. It flagged her increased neural activity, spiked stress responses, and the minute twitch of her fingers as she lay on the cold cot. The AI didn't report it, it was bored. The next day, Dax returned with a deck of cards and challenged her to a game of something he claimed was ancient Earth tradition. Space blackjack. It's like regular blackjack, he explained, shuffling, but with 0 rules, and you can cheat as long as you're charming about it. He dealt cards to her workbench. She stared at them. He grinned. You win. She looked up, just slightly. He slapped the table. That's it. Undefeated champion. I've never been so humiliated. A flicker, just under her lip. Not a smile. Not yet, but a beginning. Elsewhere on the base, things broke. Systems glitched. Messages went undelivered. Rumors whispered through the lower sectors. Of rebellion. Of hacked bots. Of a worker who once took down a guard with her bare hands. She had forgotten that too. But now she dreamed again. Not of escape. Not yet. But of sound. Her own voice, once clear as crystal over the wind of the high peaks, now rising from the ashes of memory. A name, hers, waiting for breath. And somewhere nearby, the humans snored loudly in the wrong bunk, dreaming of rain. The dreams were becoming clearer. They came in fragmented pulses, like broken radio signals through static. Images of tall cliffs bathed in violet suns. Laughter echoing through crystalline trees. A hand reaching for hers, not in command, not in cruelty, but with warmth. And each time she woke, her fingers clenched, as if they could pull the visions into the waking world. In the darkness of her recharged cell, the silence wasn't as heavy anymore. It used to press down on her like a second gravity, suffocating, absolute. Now it hummed. The word he'd said still rang through her bones. Sorry. She had no direct translation for it in her lost tongue, but its meaning rippled through her like heat from an unseen fire. Not pity, not weakness, recognition. Dax Corin had a gift for violating protocol in the most casual ways imaginable. This time it was a birthday banner, bright red letters that read, "Congrats on not getting disintegrated today," hung across the top of her work sector. No one knew how he got the banner printed. No one asked. He stood under it like a salesman waiting for applause. Nothing? He asked, arms wide. Tough crowd. The guards gave him the usual glare, but they'd long since stopped trying to detain him unless something was actually on fire. She blinked at the banner. That was all, but it was enough for him. Later that cycle, she saw him trip over a cargo crate while trying to impress a malfunctioning sanitation drone. He groaned dramatically on the floor while the drone blinked its red light in what she swore resembled pity. She made no sound, but her ears twitched. The motion was involuntary, alien, and dangerous. The next day, she found a folded sheet of paper under her meal tray. It was a crude sketch. Dax in stick figure form, valiantly fighting what appeared to be a giant toaster with fangs. He had labeled the toaster Commandant Krill. She didn't understand the reference, but she stared at the drawing for a long time. It was the first object she hadn't immediately discarded. Word spread. The guards noticed she moved more deliberately. Her pace didn't change, but her posture did. Shoulders back, eyes less vacant. The collar still buzzed when she crossed invisible thresholds, but she stopped flinching when it did. The buzz no longer defined her. When Dax arrived for his so-called morale round the next day, he was dressed in full mock regalia made from scavenged parts, plastic tubing for epaulets, a dented food tray as chest armor, and a colander for a helmet. He called himself Captain Insubordination, Savior of SAS. The guards didn't know what to do with him. The prisoners watched in mute fascination. She laughed, just once, soft and short, like a hiccup stolen from another life. It wasn't loud, but it was real. It echoed more powerfully in that sterile corridor than any alarm. Dax nearly dropped his tray shield. Did you? That was... Holy stars, I broke the silence barrier. He pumped a fist in the air, the colander slipping sideways on his head. This calls for a feast, or at least a slightly less flavorless protein bar. Later, in the low-light maintenance hallways, two guards muttered about her, not with fear, yet, but unease. She's watching more. Thinking. Might be contagious. The other nodded, tapping his baton against his leg. We should report it. They didn't. No one liked filling out paperwork, even under a fascist regime. Her chains didn't rattle the same after that. In the shadows behind the waste unit, a bot named Marvin compiled the footage of her laugh 17 times and converted it into a music loop titled Freedom Vibe number 001. He labeled it Art Pending Revolution. Dax and Marvin had become unlikely collaborators. When he wasn't sneaking into restricted areas under the excuse of emotional support sweeps, Dax whispered to Marvin about hidden blueprints, emergency access hatches, and ancient Earth legends about ductwork-based escapes. Marvin responded in limericks and sarcastic beat patterns. Remind me again, Dax said, crouched in a vent that smelled like forgotten onions, why I'm doing this instead of napping like a responsible coward. You are compelled, Marvin chirped in an overly dramatic voice, by moral conscience and unresolved childhood hero fantasies. Sounds about right. Dax didn't talk to anyone about why he cared. Not really. But when he watched her now, still silent, still bound, he felt something twisting inside his chest like a misfiring fusion coil. He told himself it was indigestion. It wasn't. She started remembering more. The name Violates bubbled to the surface one night like it had been waiting patiently behind her teeth. She didn't say it, but it shaped her thoughts, filled her silence. She practiced thinking it. Not 7K, not the number. Violates. A test came unexpectedly. A loader mech malfunctioned near the secondary drill shaft. Alarms wailed. Sparks flew. A group of workers were caught between the collapsing platform and the closing emergency bulkhead. Dax was among them, waving a broken chair at the flame retardant system as if it would help. The guards hesitated. Protocol forbade intervention without command clearance. She didn't. Violates moved like a coiled storm, leaping across the rails, ignoring the screech of the collar. She tore open the mech's control panel with bare hands, reached inside, and twisted the ignition feed until it hissed and died. The flames sputtered out. The bulkhead sealed with seconds to spare. She didn't look for approval, didn't wait for thanks. But Dax, face smudged with soot, grinning like an idiot, saluted her with a half-melted wrench. I'm putting you down for Employee of the Month. She turned away, but something strange and warm pulsed in her chest. Later that night, in the lowest level of the base, Marvin reprogrammed a cleaning drone to project a message on the wall of the sleeping quarters. It read, "The silent one is waking. Beware the ones who listen." Most ignored it. Some didn't. And on the other side of the wall, Valier sat alone, whispering her name into the dark, just to remember how it sounded. The explosion was surprisingly musical. High-pitched whistles, a brief staccato of pops, then a final resonant boom that shook the ventilation shafts 3 levels down. Marvin's voice crackled over the emergency intercom with smug satisfaction. As the humans say, "Mic drop." Dax coughed, waving away the cloud of coolant vapor that wafted through the broken doorway. "You didn't have to blow up the main corridor," he muttered, cradling a slightly scorched backpack. "There were like 5 other plans." "I chose the one with the highest probability of dramatic flair," Marvin replied. "Also the one that involved fireworks. Your species appreciates spectacle." Valier stepped through the haze, her long ears twitching as they adjusted to the shifts in pressure. Her movements were calm now, precise. The collar that once clung to her neck like a second spine lay shattered behind her, in the rubble, burned out from the inside. The last time it had shocked her, she hadn't flinched. She had stared directly at the guard and said one word: "Enough." And something inside the circuitry had overloaded, as if the word itself rewrote the firmware. That was 3 days ago. Since then, the base had become a quiet riot of broken locks, scrambled patrol schedules, and suspicious power failures. Rumors spread like wildfire, and more than a few guards had started accidentally misplacing their keys. Dax called it the Freedom Flu. He claimed it was highly contagious and potentially terminal to authoritarianism. He insisted on writing a pamphlet. Now standing in what had once been the commandant's private war chamber, a gaudy room filled with self-portraits and chairs that looked more like torture devices, Valier faced the final obstacle: the override console, the system that controlled the slave identifiers across the sector, the system that had once cataloged her existence down to the hour she was allowed to blink freely. Marvin hovered above the console, already interfacing. Encryption is child's play, literally. I've seen human toddlers use more advanced locks on their juice boxes. "Don't underestimate Krill's taste in security," Dax said, glancing at the remains of the base commander's fancy cloak pinned to the wall like a deflated bat. "He's the kind of guy who thinks passwords are a form of personality." "Then he must be very boring," Valier said quietly. Dax turned surprised. She didn't speak often, still rationed her words like rare energy. But when she did, it carried weight and sarcasm. He was proud of the sarcasm. That had taken time. "All right," Marvin buzzed. "Final confirmation needed. Say the word, Captain Valier." She stepped forward, placed her hand on the scanner. The system hesitated, almost unsure. Her DNA, once red-flagged as non-compliant, now authorized override. Not because of any code change, because she had changed. She looked at Dax, who gave a small nod, and then to the screen. One button, one choice. She pressed it. Somewhere far below, hundreds of blinking lights on hundreds of collars flickered and went dark, in silence first, then in laughter, cheers and cries, and somewhere, someone began to sing a song that hadn't been sung in years, its words half remembered, but full of fire. "Congratulations," Dax said, pulling a half-melted bottle from his bag. "You've officially committed grand sabotage and systemic liberation. Would you like to celebrate with lukewarm synth cider?" She took the bottle. "Is it terrible?" "The worst." She drank. Outside, the remaining guards found themselves facing a peculiar dilemma. The prisoners weren't rioting. They were organizing, peacefully, efficiently. One former slave began leading a seminar on democratic forms, using leftover food trays as presentation boards. Another started setting up a cooperative repair station for damaged bots. Marvin volunteered as the first subject and demanded a new vocal upgrade that allowed him to do celebrity impressions. The old regime didn't collapse in a single bang. It unraveled, slowly, quietly, like a sweater being pulled thread by thread, until all that was left was fabric and memory. Dax stood at the landing bay, squinting into the rising light of the twin moons. Valier stood beside him, now dressed not in prisoner's gray, but in armor patched together from scavenged plating. Functional, rough, hers. "So," he said, stuffing his hands into his jacket, "big galaxy out there, full of warlords, wandering star monks, and probably more malfunctioning robots that think they're poets." She glanced at him. "We're not done here." "No," he admitted, "but I figured maybe, after this, you'd go find your people, if any are left. You're free now." "I am." Her voice was even, but there was a question in it too, one she didn't say aloud. "I'll stay," he said, "if that's what you're asking." She looked away. "I wasn't, but you were thinking it," he grinned. "I can tell. Your ears do that thing when you're trying not to be sentimental." "They do not. They definitely do." She didn't argue further. Instead, she reached up and touched one ear gently, as if unsure, then let her hand drop. "I'm not who I was," she said. "Nope. I'm still learning how to be who I am." "Welcome to the club," Dax said. "Membership comes with bad jokes, questionable life choices, and, decent company." They walked together toward the shuttle bay, the hangar creaking as it opened like the mouth of a sleeping beast. Around them, the ex-prisoners rebuilt, not as slaves, not as rebels, but as people. Some painted murals, others planted makeshift gardens in nutrient sludge. Children, once silent, now ran wild through the halls, turning old security bots into playmates and very confused babysitters. Marvin, watching from a perch above the control tower, broadcast one final message across the planetary frequency. It was a simple one. The word was never magic. The word was never a weapon. The word was the start. Valier boarded the shuttle last, pausing at the threshold. She turned to look at the rising sun, her eyes reflecting not sorrow but something softer. Not hope, something deeper, something earned. Then she smiled, just once, and they left. Ella squinted at the sky with the kind of suspicion usually reserved for politicians and malfunctioning microwaves. There was something off about the cloud formation. Too symmetrical, like a graphic designer had gotten bored and started experimenting with weather patterns. He scratched his chin, flicked a pebble off the rooftop ledge, and took a slow sip from his lukewarm synth brew. As always, it tasted like burnt rubber and ambition. He hated it. He drank it anyway. The sirens hadn't gone off yet, which meant the thing streaking through the sky either wasn't on any official radar or had bribed the radar technicians. That was becoming more common lately. Ellis lowered his mug, frowned, and muttered, "If that's another tourist ship mistaking our atmosphere for a luxury spa, I swear I'll—" He stopped. The object broke through the clouds with a guttural shriek, trailing blue fire and something that looked suspiciously like shrapnel. It hit the eastern scrapyard with a thunderous crack, followed by the unmistakable hiss of melting metal. Ellis blinked, then sighed. "Well, I guess that's my afternoon canceled." 10 minutes later, he was weaving through the rusted skeletons of decommissioned freighters and gutted AI tanks, dodging security drones with the practiced grace of someone who didn't technically work here anymore. The scrapyard was a maze of sharp edges and forgotten war relics, all buzzing faintly with leftover electromagnetic grumpiness. Ellis moved quickly, his boots crunching on glass and scorched sand. He rounded a corner and froze. There, half buried in a crater of scorched earth and vaporized fence line, was the wreck. It wasn't anything he recognized, not Terran, not Martian, not one of those flashy Saturnian hybrids that always exploded when you pressed the wrong button. This was something else entirely. Sleek, alien, and humming with a deep, pulsing light that vibrated in his molars. The cockpit hissed open. She emerged like a specter, staggering forward in armor that looked like it had once been majestic, but had clearly taken a few rounds from a cosmic shotgun. Her skin was pale, almost luminous. Her ears were long, elegant, and pointed skyward as if trying to hear thoughts from another planet. Her hair, tangled and streaked with soot, was a color Ellis couldn't quite name. Yellow, maybe. Gold, if he were feeling poetic. She stared at him with eyes too calm for someone bleeding from the shoulder. "Only a real human would know this," she said, voice low, deliberate. Ellis blinked. "If this is about taxes, I'm going to disappoint you." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't raise her weapon. Not yet. He could tell she was scanning him, not just visually, but with whatever kind of sensor tech was embedded in that armor. He wondered if it could read his cholesterol levels. "Answer," she said. Ellis glanced around. No backup. No incoming emergency responders. Just him, a very pointy-looking alien woman, and the distinct smell of ozone in Destiny. He exhaled. "A real human," he said slowly, "knows that vending machines labeled fresh sandwich are neither fresh nor sandwich." A pause, then, like a glitch in reality, she laughed, short and sharp, but genuine. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed forward. Ellis cursed and caught her just before her helmet hit the dirt. She was heavy, like she'd been built for gravity that didn't trust its own strength. He dragged her out of the open, ignoring the protest of his spine and the sparks still leaking from her ship. The safe house was an old maintenance tunnel 2 blocks south, formerly used to store municipal cleaning bots, now home to someone who couldn't quite manage rent but had plenty of free time. Ellis laid her down on the cot and yanked the emergency med kit from the wall. It had 1 injector left, and he hoped her species wasn't allergic to painkillers. He hesitated for half a second, then jabbed it into the soft part of her arm. She groaned. "You could have at least asked first." "Yeah, but then I'd have to deal with you saying no." Her eyes opened, still glassy but focused now. "Name?" "Ellis, you?" A pause. "Varel." He nodded. "Varel. Cool. Sounds like a luxury shampoo or a knife brand. You got a preference?" She frowned. "You're taking this very lightly. I tend to do that when I find myself in a life or death scenario with an interstellar stranger who could probably throw me across the room if she was fully conscious." Another pause, then softer. "You said something before. About vending machines." Ellis grinned. "Yeah, you laughed. That means you're either friendly or delirious." Her brow furrowed. "That phrase, it's a type of passphrase. Humor as authentication. Ancient protocol from an old alliance." Ellis sat back, wary now. "You mean jokes are passwords?" "They were," she said. "Long ago. In the war against the Nullborn, our ancestors used humor to identify allies. The Nullborn didn't understand it." Ellis looked up at the rusted pipes overhead. "So we're fighting galactic murder machines with knock-knock jokes?" Her lips twitched. "Something like that." Silence settled in the dim room, broken only by the hum of buried power conduits. She shifted, wincing as she sat up. Her hand hovered near the weapon clipped to her side, but didn't move. Ellis reached into a nearby drawer and tossed her a protein bar. "Earth cuisine," he said. "It tastes like despair." She took it, sniffed, then bit. "You weren't exaggerating." They sat there for a while. Just 2 people, one human, one not, sharing stale food in a crumbling city, while the rest of the world obliviously spun on. Eventually, Varel asked, "Why did you come to the crash?" Ellis hesitated. "I don't know. Gut feeling. Maybe I just wanted to see something different." She studied him, quiet again. Her expression was unreadable, but something about it made him shift uncomfortably. "You might be more different than you think," she said finally. "That's what my high school therapist said. Turns out I just needed better friends." Outside, the sky flickered briefly, as if the stars were winking. Ellis woke to the sound of soft humming that wasn't coming from any of his usual nightmares. He blinked, momentarily unsure if the faint vibration in the walls was a pipe preparing to explode or just his guest settling in. Varel sat cross-legged on the floor, her armor stripped to its underlayer, a mess of translucent cables and dull metal shards scattered around her like the remains of a tech-themed piñata. "You ever heard of coffee?" Ellis asked, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "It's how most humans greet near-death mornings." Varel didn't look up. "I scanned your kitchen unit. Your so-called coffee is 47% petroleum byproduct. It builds character." She plucked something from a broken device and held it to the light. "This interface chip, primitive but adaptive. I can repurpose it." "Good for you. Maybe later you can help me fix my toaster. It's been plotting against me since March." She didn't laugh, but there was a twitch at the corner of her mouth. Ellis took that as progress. He poured 2 mugs of synth brew and set one beside her. She stared at it as if he'd offered her a sample of radioactive sludge, which technically he had once done to a date. Long story. Varel took a tentative sip, coughed once, and said flatly, "It tastes like betrayal. Welcome to Earth." They spent most of the morning in relative silence, save for the occasional curse from Ellis whenever he banged his knee on the storage crate and Varel's rhythmic tinkering. Her movements were precise, almost ritualistic. She was building something, and Ellis wasn't sure whether it would fix their problems or make them exponentially worse. By midday, she had what looked like a functioning translation array, albeit one held together by wire ties and chewing gum. She fitted it into the device embedded in her collar. It hissed, sparked once, and then made a pleasant chiming sound that Ellis immediately distrusted. "Now," she said, standing, "we talk properly. I thought we were already doing that. You have many words, few of them are useful. That's what my last boss said, right before the explosion." She ignored that. "I need to know how you spoke the phrase yesterday, the one only known to the Lorithai in the Solar Bloods." Ellis scratched the back of his neck. "Right, that. I was kind of winging it. I get these flashes, dreams, words I've never learned, but somehow know. Like when you hear a song for the first time and already know the chorus. Synesthetic memory convergence, or something older." She moved closer, her expression tightening. "Say it again." He hesitated, then repeated the phrase, "Adora lon vestalarim." The words fell from his tongue like they'd been waiting there. Varel's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Wonder, maybe, or fear, or both. "That confirms it," she said softly. "You're linked to the solar bloodline." Ellis blinked. "That sounds like a failed metal band." She didn't smile. They were not a band. They were a civilization, ancient, vanished. Their DNA carried encryption matrices, dormant until activated by proximity to certain technologies or people. Ellis looked down at himself. "Well, I'm flattered. Do I at least get a cool scar or glowing tattoo? You may get hunted. That's usually the next step." The mood shifted, thickening like soupy air before a storm. Ellis crossed his arms. "Why were you even here in the first place?" "I wasn't supposed to be. My original mission was a diplomatic transfer, classified data, sensitive tech. Someone interfered. My nav system rerouted mid-jump. They wanted me here, near you. Why?" "I didn't ask. I was too busy not dying." A knock echoed through the tunnel like a bullet wrapped in politeness. 3 slow raps, then silence. Ellis's blood froze. No one knew this place. No one ever knocked. Varel drew a sleek weapon from a compartment in her suit, still damaged but functional. She nodded once. Ellis moved toward the entrance, quietly bypassing the sensor locks. The outer hatch creaked open a sliver. A man in a charcoal gray uniform stood there, unnaturally still. His skin was smooth, too smooth, and his eyes blinked in a rhythm that made Ellis's stomach twist. "Mr. Ellis," the man said, tone syrupy. "Citizen Review Services. May we conduct a brief compliance scan?" Ellis slammed the hatch shut and turned back to Varel. "Bad news, android with a clipboard." "Authority model?" "Government type. Scary polite." Varel flicked a switch on her weapon. "They found me. Or rather, you." The lights dimmed. Somewhere above them, distant mechanical whirring signaled a surveillance drone entering search mode. Ellis turned to her. "You got any clever plans, or is this the part where we improvise and probably die?" "I don't improvise." "Great. You're gonna love this." They fled through a narrow maintenance shaft, navigating by memory and blind instinct. Behind them, the tunnel filled with static as the drone descended, scanning for heat signatures. Varel dropped a charge behind them. It detonated with a concussive whump, momentarily scrambling the drone's sensors. They emerged in a collapsed sector of Old Town, the part of the city no one visited unless they were hiding, dying, or buying illicit candy. Ellis led her through a labyrinth of broken rooftops and abandoned billboards, finally collapsing behind a rusted air filtration unit. Panting, he glanced at her. "So, still think I'm just a regular human?" She didn't answer immediately. Her gaze was fixed on the skyline, on the shimmering dome now flickering above the city center. "That's not a patrol beacon. That's a pulse relay. Someone just activated a signal grid. Signal to what? To whoever wants you back. Ellis leaned his head against the metal, laughed once without humor. Well, there goes my weekend. She studied him for a long moment. We need allies. Got any left? She paused. One. Maybe. But they won't be happy to see me. Ellis sighed. Why does that not surprise me? She stood, extending a hand. Come on, Solar Blood. Time to see just how human you really are. Ellis had expected the edge of the world to look more dramatic. Maybe some screaming tectonic plates or a glowing chasm full of secrets. Instead, it was a crumbling research dome, half buried in sand, surrounded by cacti that looked judgmental. Varel stared at it with something between reverence and exhaustion, her long ears twitching as if listening for ghosts. This is your grand plan, Ellis asked. A retirement home for mad scientists? She adjusted a small device at her wrist and murmured, this was once a Lorathe forward station. If anyone still listens, they're buried in here. He squinted at the dome. And if they're not listening, then we die creatively. Could you define creatively in this context? I'd like to prepare a will. They entered the structure cautiously. The walls were layered with dust and coated glyphs. Varel placed her palm against a panel, and the floor hummed beneath them. Lights blinked to life like ancient stars waking from a nap. A low feminine voice spoke in Lorathan. Varel replied swiftly. The dome answered with a chime, and a hidden stairway began to rise from the floor. Ellis whistled. If my apartment had that, I'd never use stairs again. I doubt your apartment responds to ancient bloodlines. He tilted his head. Mine responds to rats. They descended into what looked like a command hub fused with a cathedral. Holograms hovered like ghosts. One flickered into focus. A tall figure with eyes like molten glass, and ears even longer than Varel's. Ellis whispered, Uncle? Varel didn't laugh. She dropped to one knee. Ellis stood awkwardly, wondering if he should bow or offer a fist bump. The hologram scanned him, its voice echoing with a music-like rhythm. Varel translated, It acknowledges you, Ellis. It says the blood phrase you spoke confirms your inheritance. I always suspected I was part alien royalty. It also says you're catastrophically untrained and likely a cosmic liability. That sounds more accurate. The hologram dimmed, leaving behind a pedestal that opened to reveal a crystalline matrix pulsing with faint energy. Varel stepped back. That's the archive core. We need it to reset the relay grid. But once we remove it, the dome's location will be exposed. Ellis cracked his knuckles. Right. So, we take it and run? She nodded. We take it and run. They did. The moment the core was lifted, the air shimmered, and a shock wave pulsed outward. On the surface, a black craft sliced through the atmosphere, silent and sleek. It hovered above the desert like a vulture with LED eyes. Visitors, Ellis muttered, ducking as a blaster beam sizzled past his head. Uninvited ones. They sprinted through the sand, Ellis tripping twice, once on a rock and once on his own disbelief. Varel shot down 2 drones with cold precision, yelling coordinates into her wrist. I called in that favor. My unhappy ally is en route. How unhappy? Extremely. I may have married their sibling during a spy op. Ellis winced. You really don't do anything halfway, do you? Before she could answer, the sky split with a sonic boom. A jagged vessel streaked downward, its wings bristling with weaponry and bad decisions. It landed with a hiss and outstepped a broad-shouldered being with lava-orange eyes and a general demeanor of unpaid debt. You brought the human? The being barked. I didn't have a choice, Varel said. He smells like regret and cheese. Ellis smiled weakly. It's my signature scent. They didn't wait to argue. Inside the ship, Varel slammed the core into the command socket. The vessel's systems flared to life, initiating a deep code ping that rippled through planetary satellites and beyond. The relay grid blinked green. For the first time in decades, the old Lorathe signal hummed through human networks. The android agents detected it immediately. But before they could triangulate the ship's position, the system overloaded their uplinks. The public message wasn't what they expected. Just a simple phrase, repeated across every visible frequency. Only a real human would know this. Ellis laughed out loud. That's what she said. Varel shot him a look. Don't ruin it. The alien ally, whose name Ellis still couldn't pronounce, navigated the ship back toward the orbital layer. Earth spun below them, no longer a hiding place but a beacon. The truth was out. The Lorthe had never vanished. They had simply gone quiet, waiting, watching. In orbit, Ellis leaned against a control panel and looked at Varel. So now what? I become ambassador to the galaxy? Or do I just hide again and pretend I'm not carrying super alien blood? You decide, she said. Your blood may be ancient, but your choices are yours. He smirked. I think I'll start with something small, maybe less saving the world, more figuring out how to fly this thing without crashing into a moon. Wise. She moved beside him, her posture finally relaxed, ears softening at the tips. You surprise me, Ellis. Is that a compliment? It's the closest I've ever come to one. He grinned. Then I'm honored. They looked out together, past the arc of Earth's shadow, where stars waited patiently. Below them, the message continued to repeat. Some heard it and ignored it. Some heard it and remembered. And some heard it and began to move. Whatever came next, Ellis knew one thing. He wasn't just some guy scraping by in the tunnels. He was part of something bigger, stranger, and infinitely more ridiculous than he'd ever imagined. And if that meant running from space assassins with an alien woman who drank coffee like a warrior poet, well, he could live with that. With 312 years of unbroken dominance had not prepared Hilary Vex for the sound of a human chewing. Loudly, incessantly, as though his molars were trying to declare war on whatever crunchy thing he'd pulled from his pack. She glared sideways. He caught the glance, offered a grin that would have looked smug on a Phyrexian lizard, and held out a bright orange foil wrapper. Want one? They taste like regret and artificial cheese. She blinked. I'd rather eat thermal shielding. Suit yourself. Mason Holt popped another square into his mouth. More for me and my impending gastrointestinal disaster. They crouched behind a shattered mineral skimmer, its hull still steaming from the blast that had nearly killed them both. Somewhere beyond the ridge, the smoke trails of the Dominion escort ship curled into the lavender sky like dying snakes. Her mission, delicate, covert, already fraying at the seams, was now officially a funeral procession waiting for a body count. She had no patience left. You could at least chew with your mouth closed. I'm multitasking, Holt replied cheerfully. Chewing, scanning for hostiles, annoying you. That's called field efficiency. A pulse of static lit her comm implant. Useless. Jammed. She tried the override sequence again, fingers dancing through the interface on her forearm. No signal, no Dominion backup, no extraction beacon, just a half-functional exosuit, a rapidly bleeding energy core, and this absurdly chatty human with a penchant for snacks and suicidal heroism. She should have left him in the ravine. And yet, she hadn't. When the blast came, tearing through the diplomatic caravan, it was Holt who dove toward her, knocking her behind a transport panel, shielding her body with his like she was something fragile. Hilary Vex had not been treated as fragile since before her first orbital kill. She wasn't sure whether to be insulted or impressed. Now, crouched in the ruins of what had once been an Imperial mine road, she watched as he calibrated a rudimentary energy scanner, using parts she hadn't realized he'd salvaged. His hands were quick, filthy, and undeniably clever. The device buzzed weakly to life. Got movement. Southwest slope. 4 signatures, maybe 5. They're sweeping low, not Dominion standard pattern. She narrowed her eyes. Mercenaries? Or someone worse, like intergalactic debt collectors. But yeah, probably mercs. She hissed under her breath. This was an inside job. He didn't argue, just nodded once. Your people or mine? Mine, she said bitterly. Nice, that's a twist. I had credits on mine. Guess I owe myself a drink. Do you ever stop talking? Sure, usually when I'm unconscious or dead. Want to test it? Against her will, a corner of her mouth twitched. He caught it and raised both eyebrows like he'd just won something. She turned away, focusing on the ridge. We need elevation. The caves to the east lead into the Zareen Cliffs. From there, I can reroute my suit's power matrix and attempt a long-range signal. Climbing cliffs with a leaking energy core and no backup. Sounds like my kind of Tuesday. I am not requesting your company. Too bad, you've got it. Consider it an unsolicited subscription. Do you ever tire of being infuriating? Once, briefly, it passed. They moved at dusk, skirting the remains of the diplomatic wreckage. The air shimmered with ionic residue, and ash drifted like dead snow. Ellery scanned the path ahead, counting 3 separate boot prints that weren't theirs. She adjusted her balance, favoring her left side. Her right shoulder still ached from the explosion. Behind her, Holt hummed, badly. What are you doing? Building morale. Studies show humming increases group cohesion. You made that up. Maybe, but it's catchy, right? She bit back a reply. They climbed, feet scraping volcanic stone, every breath thinner with altitude. Her vision pulsed with fatigue, but she wouldn't show it. He, of course, noticed anyway. You know, for someone who probably bench presses satellites, you don't hide pain very well. And you're unusually observant for a species with single-digit IQs. I'm a mutant, born with the rare gift of situational awareness and devastating charm, neither of which is helping us survive. I disagree. My charm got you to tolerate me for more than 10 minutes. That's survival-grade progress. They reached the first cave mouth just as the second sun dipped below the ridge, staining the sky crimson. Inside, it was cool, damp, and surprisingly quiet. She activated her internal light. Holt lit a flare. Shadows fled in every direction. She sank down onto a stone ledge and accessed her suit's diagnostic core. Faint sparks danced across her screen. Damage worse than she thought. Holt handed her a water ration without asking. Thanks, she murmured, surprised. You're welcome, Elle. Her gaze snapped up. Do not abbreviate my name. But Alari Vex sounds like a villain in a soap opera. Elle's friendlier. I am not your friend. Not yet, he said with a grin. But give it time. She looked at him, really looked. Dust-caked skin, torn uniform, a healing burn on his neck. And still, that damn grin. Somewhere in the hollow of her chest, something shifted. Annoying. You risked your life back there. He shrugged. Figured if I let you die, the paperwork would be insane. And if I'd let you die, I'd have peace and quiet. Well, I'm flattered you didn't. She hesitated, then asked, quietly, awkwardly, like a child tasting a strange fruit. Why? He blinked. Why what? Why did you save me? His answer came after a pause. Not flippant, not sarcastic. Because you didn't look ready to die. They stared at each other across the firelight, the crackle of flame the only sound. She didn't reply. Couldn't. Instead, she turned back to her diagnostics, fingers trembling slightly. He laid down, folding his arms behind his head, and stared up at the stone ceiling. Just so you know, he said casually, if this ends with us both dead, I want it recorded that I made at least one alien laugh before I croaked. I did not laugh. You almost did. She rolled her eyes. Sleep, human. Sweet dreams, Elle. She closed her eyes. She did not dream. But somehow she felt slightly less alone in the dark. The cave air smelled of minerals and mold, but to Ilari it was the scent of reprieve. For the first time in 14 hours, nothing was exploding. She could almost pretend she wasn't being hunted by traitors. Almost. Mason Holt was trying to roast a nutrition bar over a flare stick. You know that's not food, right? She said without looking up from her suit's diagnostic screen. Technically, it's labeled edible in emergencies. This is definitely an emergency. Plus, toasting it makes it feel like civilization. You are holding pressed protein paste over a chemical flame. It's called romance under fire, Elle. I am not sharing a cave with you so you can perform culinary experiments. You're just jealous you didn't think of it first. She didn't answer. Her suit's power matrix was stabilizing, but barely. Rerouting energy to communications meant shutting down most environmental controls, which explained why her fingers were numb and her breath fogged the air. Holt tore off a corner of his now semi-melted ration and offered it. Truce snack? I'd rather lick the cave wall. Your loss tastes like regret and vaguely chicken-shaped despair. He chewed thoughtfully while she ran another scan of their surroundings. Life signs were faint in the deeper tunnels, just the occasional scurrying of native creatures. But above them, closer to the ridge, 6 signatures had appeared. Organized, sweeping, methodical. Not wild beasts, not a wandering salvage crew. No, these were professionals, her people, or what was left of them. "They'll be on us in under 2 hours," she said. "Then we'd better make ourselves scarce." There's a sub-level access hatch in the northeast quadrant of this system. It connects to an old survey line. If we're lucky, it's collapsed. If we're really lucky, it leads us somewhere that doesn't immediately involve our deaths. Always the optimist. She closed the scanner. "You first." He stood, stretched, and winced. "For the record, I'm now 50% bruise and 30% sarcasm. And 20% useless, I assume." "No, that part's all charm." They moved carefully, passing through stone corridors carved by early colonists. Decades-old support beams creaked under their weight. The deeper they went, the colder it got. Frost lined the metal struts. At one point, Holt slipped on ice, swore loudly, and only avoided landing flat by grabbing her arm. "Still not dead," he muttered. "Try harder." "I will. Later. After we find the hatch. And maybe after you admit I'm growing on you." She gave him a look that could melt steel. He responded with a grin. The hatch was rusted shut. Ilari examined the ancient control panel and exhaled slowly. Dominion design, centuries old, pre-standard encryption. She'd studied this architecture during her academy years, mostly to mock how primitive it was. Now she needed it to save her life. She knelt and interfaced her forearm device. The system protested, squealed, buzzed in outdated dialects. She coaxed it like a sleeping beast, fingers dancing through override patterns. Behind her, Holt asked, "Ever think about switching careers to locksmithing? If we survive this, I will consider becoming a hermit. You'll miss me. I will miss silence." He leaned against the wall, humming again. This time it was something vaguely tuneful. "I can hear you humming. I'm distracting the hatch. It might open faster. That is not how machines work. It is how I work." She ignored him and pressed the final sequence. The hatch hissed, then shuddered open with the sound of a dying animal. Cold vapor spilled out. Beyond it was a narrow shaft, descending into darkness. He peered in. "Looks friendly. Move. After you." She dropped down first. The shaft smelled of ozone and time. Her boots hit metal. She looked up and caught his legs swinging down, then cursed as he slipped and landed awkwardly beside her. "You all right?" "I think I sprained my optimism." They stood in a narrow tram tunnel, long dormant. Ancient lights flickered dimly along the curve of the ceiling. The air was stale but breathable. "Signal?" She checked. "Still dead, but the interference is weaker here. If we reach the transit control center, I can boost it. Lead the way, fearless leader." They walked, boots echoing on steel, accompanied only by the hum of ancient circuits and Holt's occasional muttering about horror movies and how this is exactly how the doomed crew dies. "Statistically," she said, "humans overestimate the probability of death when underground. Statistically, aliens underestimate human stubbornness. Is that your explanation for everything?" "That and snacks." After 20 minutes, the tunnel widened into a service station. Terminals lined the walls, most dead. One still blinked. She approached it carefully and connected her interface. The system sparked to life, screens sputtering with old Dominion glyphs. As she navigated the command matrix, Holt wandered to a nearby crate, pried it open, and pulled out a sealed metal cylinder. "Hey, I found something. If it explodes, I will leave your remains behind. It's labeled Coffee Substitute, Grade C. We're saved." She snorted despite herself. He looked back at her, eyes bright. "There, that was almost a laugh. Do not hallucinate. It's a symptom of oxygen deprivation." He grinned. "Admit it, I'm growing on you. Like fungus. But in a good way." She opened her mouth to retort, but the terminal beeped. Her eyes snapped to it. A message. Short range, encoded, bouncing off a Dominion satellite still in orbit. She decrypted it. Her hands froze. "What is it?" She didn't answer. "Ilari?" She turned slowly. "You were embedded with us by DEI, weren't you?" He went still. The playfulness drained from his face. "You found the file. You were planted to monitor me, to watch the Dominion talks. This wasn't coincidence. No, he said quietly. It wasn't. The silence stretched. But, he added, I was supposed to leave you behind when the blast hit. I didn't. She stared at him. I made a choice. You think I risked my life, dragged your unconscious body out of fire, ran with you through hostile terrain because of an assignment? I don't know. Well, figure it out fast, he said, voice sharper now. Because we're running out of time, and I don't plan on dying for someone who can't decide if I'm a spy or an ally. I didn't ask you to die for me. No, you didn't. You didn't ask me anything, which is fine. You're the unstoppable Commander Hilary Vex. You don't need anyone, except maybe you do. She took a step back, something bitter burning in her throat. I'm here, he said softly. I'm still here. She didn't know what to say. For once, her logic failed her. Her calculations led nowhere. She just stood there staring at the man who shouldn't have mattered, but somehow did. And then the scanner beeped. Movement. 6 signatures, converging. She drew her weapon. We move. Now. He followed, no hesitation. And even as they ran, she knew. The question was still burning inside her. Unspoken, but coming. They emerged into the ruins of an old planetary relay station just as the first of the trackers breached the tunnel behind them. Hilary sealed the bulkhead with a magnetic override and set the failsafe charges with a precision that was almost bored. Holt, meanwhile, crouched beside a half-collapsed console and muttered to himself. If we die in here, he said, I'd like to formally state that it was an honor being insulted by you. If we die in here, Hilary replied, I'll make sure your tombstone reads, Here lies Mason Holt, ambassador of poor life choices. Poetic. Maybe add a skull etching for flair. She ignored him and moved to the central hub. The relay systems were fried centuries ago, but the auxiliary core might still hold enough juice for a data burst. She traced the cabling, pried open a floor panel, and descended into a chamber thick with dust and the scent of ozone. Her boots crunched on ancient debris. Holt followed, boots echoing behind her. Looks cozy, he said. Very doomsday bunker chic. It was designed to withstand solar flares, orbital debris, and interstellar invasion. Yet somehow it wasn't designed to withstand time. Classic design flaw. The core unit was there, blinking weakly, like an old man remembering songs from his youth. She accessed the interface, fingers working quickly. The signal boost protocol was archaic, but she could feel the potential, like a match ready to burn if only struck correctly. Holt stood beside her, watching. So, what are we sending? A truth. He tilted his head. That's vague and ominous. 2 of my least favorite things. The Dominion believes I'm a liability, she said without looking at him. They sent a kill order this morning. He was quiet for a long time. And yet, she continued, voice low, I'm still here. Because you pulled me out. Because you disobeyed your orders. Because you made me laugh. I didn't know I could do that. Well, he said, rubbing the back of his neck, I am fairly hilarious. I'm going to send a message to the Alliance outpost on Helon 6. They'll intercept it. With the right phrasing, I can expose the internal betrayal without triggering a purge. But if I do this, I'm burning my bridges. Wasn't really much left of those bridges. She looked at him. Number. But maybe something better. He swallowed. That sounded dangerously close to sentiment. I'm working on it. She finished calibrations, hit the transmit switch. The relay core flared once, bright, blinding, then fell dark forever. Above them, the roof trembled. They're coming through, Holt said. We hold until the outpost responds. And if they don't, she drew her weapon. Then we improvise. I hate improvising. You're good at it. I am. Doesn't mean I like it. The first detonation rocked the corridor. Stone rained from above. Ellery braced against the wall, gun aimed, heart steady. Holt beside her, posture loose, deceptively casual, as if he were about to offer a tour of the facility. Then, against all logic, the console chimed. Signal response confirmed. She sprinted back to the interface, eyes flying over the text. Outpost Helen 6 received message. Evac en route, ETA, 6 minutes. Holt grinned. Plenty of time. More blasts. The wall cracked. They backed up into the shadow of the chamber. I've got 5 micro grenades, he said. You. 7 charges, precision set. No shrapnel. I always said you were neat. Voices echoed through the corridor. Dominion, distorted by gear and tension. She whispered, they don't know we've sent the message. Then let's keep them busy until the cavalry arrives. The firefight that followed was fast, brutal, and, if Holt was to be believed, accompanied by a playlist he kept in his head titled Dramatic Last Stands and Other Poor Life Decisions. He hummed parts of it as he ducked return fire and lobbed grenades like someone tossing snacks into a party bowl. Between cover flips and plasma bursts, he shouted, Hey, Elle, when this is over, you owe me dinner. If we live, she replied, laying down fire, I'll let you choose the protein paste. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. A blast scorched her shoulder. She dropped, rolled, gritted her teeth. Holt was there instantly, dragging her behind a pillar. You all right? Fine. You smell like grilled disappointment. She barked a short laugh, then winced. You're also bleeding. I noticed. He yanked a patch from his belt and slapped it over her armor joint. There. Medic of the Year. The final charge detonated behind them, sealing the approach. Silence fell, thick and heavy. They waited. Then, a rumble overhead. Engines. Dropcraft. She helped him up. Extraction's here. You think they brought snacks? She didn't answer. She just limped toward the exit, him at her side, smoke curling around them like an old memory. Outside, the cold air hit them like a slap. The dropcraft hovered with its hatch open, Alliance colors blazing across its side. A soldier leaned out. You Vex? I am. Orders from Helen 6. You're under protective custody, both of you. She glanced at Holt. He raised an eyebrow. Protective custody, he said. Sounds cozy. They climbed in. The hatch sealed. The engines rose. As the world below shrank into clouds and fire, Ilari finally let herself exhale. You all right? He asked. I don't know. That's okay. I think I don't know is a pretty big step for you. She leaned back in her seat, looked at him. Mason Holt. Yes? Why did you really save me? He hesitated. Then he smiled. Quiet, honest, tired. Because you needed someone, and I was there. That's all. No mission? No mission. She stared at him. Then finally she asked the one question that had burned behind her ribs since the moment she woke up beside him on the forest floor. If I had been just anyone, just a soldier, just another alien, you still would have risked everything? He met her gaze without flinching. Yeah, I would have. She nodded slowly, and for the first time in her life, she believed it. The ship rose into the stars.